Welcome to the Sense Making in a Changing World podcast, where we explore the kind of thinking we need to navigate a positive way forward. I'm your host, Morag Gamble, permaculture educator and global ambassador, filmmaker, eco-villager, food forester, mother, practivist, and all-round lover of thinking, communicating, and acting regeneratively. For a long time, it's been clear to me that to shift trajectory to a thriving one-planet way of life, we first need to shift our thinking. The way we perceive ourselves in relation to nature, self, and community is the core. So this is true now more than ever, and even the way change is changing. Unprecedented changes are happening all around us at a rapid pace. So how do we make sense of this? To know which way to turn, to know what action to focus on, so our efforts are worthwhile and nourishing and are working towards resilience, regeneration, and reconnection. What better way to make sense than to join together with others in open, generative conversation? In this podcast, I'll share conversations with my friends and colleagues, people who inspire and challenge me in their ways of thinking, connecting, and acting. These wonderful people are thinkers, doers, activists, scholars, writers, leaders, farmers, educators, people whose work informs permaculture and spark the imagination of what a post-COVID, climate-resilient, socially just future could look like. Their ideas and projects help us to make sense in this changing world, to compost and digest the ideas, and to nurture the fertile ground for new ideas, connections, and actions. Together we'll open up conversations in the world of permaculture design, regenerative thinking, community action, earth repair, eco-literacy, and much more. I can't wait to share these conversations with you. Over the last 3 decades of personally making sense of the multiple crises we face, I always return to the practical and positive world of permaculture, with its ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. I've seen firsthand how adaptable and responsive it can be in all contexts, from urban to rural, from refugee camps to suburbs. It helps people make sense of what's happening around them and to learn accessible design tools to shape their habitat positively and to contribute to cultural and ecological regeneration. This is why I've created the Permaculture Educators Program, to help thousands of people to become permaculture teachers everywhere through an interactive online dual certificate of permaculture design and teaching. We sponsor global Permayouth programs, women's self-help groups in the Global South, and teens in refugee camps. So anyway, this podcast is sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute and our Permaculture Educators Program. If you'd like to find more about permaculture, I've created a 4-part permaculture video series to explain what permaculture is and also how you can make it your livelihood as well as your way of life. We'd love to invite you to join our wonderfully inspiring, friendly and supportive global learning community. So I welcome you to share each of these conversations, and I'd also like to suggest you create a local conversation circle to explore the ideas shared in each show and discuss together how this makes sense in your local community and environment. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I meet and speak with you today, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. It's my pleasure to invite you to join me in conversation in this episode with Juan Jose Lugo Bernal of Pangea Regenera. He's a permaculture designer, regenerative landscape consultant and permaculture educator too. We talk about his journey from engineering to working in the FAO to studying ancient patterns of design. He's the coordinator of Huerto que Curo, a community therapeutic garden in the hospital for elderly in Quito, Ecuador. He started intentional communities as well as consulting with government and NGOs. He's passionate about new forms of education that connects us deeply with place and community. It's actually how we met through the Rethinking Education Forum earlier this year. The story Juan shares is a fascinating journey of transformation, of discovery, of creativity, and a love of life. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So thank you for joining me today on the show, Juan. Juan and I have met through a program that was back in March this year called Reimagining Education. And so we chatted recently and where Juan was interviewing me. So we decided to turn the tables and I would interview Juan. So welcome to the show. When we were speaking, there were so many different things that I wanted to explore with you about the work that you're doing in Ecuador and in other parts through these global connections. So perhaps maybe you could just start by introducing perhaps the connection that you have with permaculture from the beginning. Like, where does that fit with your worldview?
Awesome. Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for turning this table. And yeah, it's so awesome to find the spaces where we can inspire each other and like learn from each other. And I really deeply appreciate it. So about me, I've been involved in permaculture for it should be 8-9 years now. And I formally study agriculture engineering. And I always was trying to, what I was more focused, of course, in the traditional academy system, let's say, I was more into industry, let's say. So I was always trying to find a way different from that. I went from traditional to organic, and I found that it was not what I was looking for. Always focusing on the industry, of course. And then I turned into more agroecological processes from Latin America, all over. And I found it super, super interesting. But at the moment, I wanted something more hands-on, let's say. I wanted to find more eco-techniques, let's say. I don't know if that is a word that's well translated. I don't know if
that makes sense.
Of course, if something it's weird in my pronunciation or I'm saying something wrong, please correct me. My English is not that good. So, okay. So let's have that. And then I found permaculture, and then permaculture allowed me to put it into one of the things that I love the most of permaculture at the moment, and that I've found it super enlightening for a lot of people still, and I share like that, is that when I was reading through the permaculture design course, the big book, let's say, I can find philosophy, I can find biology, I can find physics, I can find everything. And then going through and understanding the petals of permaculture, and it was like, this is it. It's not a vision that encapsulates like reductionism or positivism academy approach that I was like so much having struggles with. And I was trying to unlearn from that. And it was a stressful moment in my life, trying to renegotiate with myself these agreements that I had on how I relate with the world and how I relate with myself, with my relationships, with everything that I am involving with. So challenging that, it was exciting at the same time that it was making me a lot of anger inside of myself, because it was confronting myself in so many things that I didn't agree. And some agreements, social agreements, cultural agreements, family agreements, and so on, so on. So at the beginning, I started to reject it because I was like, no, this cannot be. But at the end, I was like, this is it. But the work is on me, on my inner self. So
can I just stop you there? Because that's so interesting. And I wonder, what were some of those inner arguments that you were having with yourself around wanting to like reject it? Like what was happening in your mind? What were some of those conversations? Because I think a lot of people would be experiencing the same thing, and it's just interesting to hear that you just kind of like put it out on the table like that.
At the moment, it's always super good to understand that every person has it's like understanding what someone is going through. You need to understand the context and the moment in the lives of everyone. And at the moment of in my life, I was finishing my engineering career, and I was still kind of bound to these agreements of satisfying my family wishes. Of course, I come from a family with privileges. that allows me to study whatever I wanted. They give me that freedom to do, which is, I don't know, it's not that, it's difficult here in the South, let's say, especially in Latin America. So I had that privilege, and I always have this idea that I was like the guy that I from early on, my engineering kind of thinking and way of framing things was like, you're going to be an engineer. So this is the path that you're going to take, and you're going to specialize, and you're going to go for your master, for your PhD for sure, and then you are going to keep going. And I think that my family thought a lot of me as a professor or as an academist, something like that. And I was not into that. Like, I keep doing that because I wanted to please my family. Even though I had the options, the ability, the privileges, I had these agreements that I put in myself, and that I agreed without knowing that was something that I had to do. So the first break is like, I should not specialize and integrate in this kind of organic way of thinking, instead of like compartmentalizing.
Compartmentalizing. Yeah.
That word. Yeah. Instead of doing that and like approaching life in a way that it's more about relationships and connections, instead of like taking atoms of it and studying that. And I always had a strong call for social connections, for social arrangements, for social life, not in a kind of like social parties or something like that, but like how we can work as a community. Mm-hmm. So mixing those worlds was a strong break from what I was learning from the university and from what my family wanted to from me, let's say. So that was one of the first.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what were some of the things that inspired you or gave you the courage to take quite a big step, to unpack and unentwine yourself from those agreements? What was the fire in your belly that gave you the courage to do that?
I think I had the opportunity when I was doing this transition work myself. I keep going. At the time, I was encouraged to continue with my master's degree, and I went to Spain, and then I was able to do my master thesis in FAO, in the Food Organization of the United Nations. And for me, that was kind of in this still like knowing permaculture, knowing what it entails, and having this. And at the same time, I was on the top of what I wanted to do. Let's say I'm already inside FAO. And I was like, okay, this is the top. This is where I'm supposed to be. I can build a career from here. But as much as I get to know how FAO was working and what people was doing there, I found a strong urge that this is not right. Mm. This is not right for me. And I don't believe in what people are. And of course, there's so many awesome people there. There's so many awesome, beautiful people there. So intelligent people. So I learned so much there. But in the whole arrangement, let's say, I didn't agree with so many things. And I think that was the most like, this is not right. Mm-hmm. This is not for me. And I need to find a better way. And then I came back. I started teaching at a rural university around here in the coast side of the country. And I didn't agree with the academy either. And I was like getting angrier and angrier with what the path that it was supposed to be like, let's say ONG works or whatever, and then academy work keep on going. And it was like, no, I don't believe in this. And I started traveling around South America, and I went south to Argentina. And then I started to do a permaculture internship there. And then from there, a whole process started for me. I traveled around a couple countries in South America, and I started an eco-village over there. And and that was it. That was the rethinking, re-educating myself, deconstructing myself, which is right now it's kind of so weird to use in these times because there's so many things around the construction. But for me, that was it.
So you've just kind of very casually threw in, we just started an eco-village as part of that flow of your words there. You just started an eco-village. Tell us about what that means, and what also as part of that thread, what are some of the things that you're noticing about permaculture in Latin America, permaculture and eco-villages? I guess that's kind of lots of big questions altogether, but wherever that takes you.
Yeah, there are big questions. Of course, this is my experience. This is how, it's my opinion that I have built upon my experiences. So I don't think that it will reflect the whole point of view of South America movement around eco-villages or intentional communities. But for me, it was a so strong moment in my life, and going into that process of human relationships and going through that process of knowing yourself in a kind of harsh conditions with with nothing really, because we needed to pick the water from the river to do everything, basically. So that was the situation that was going on there. And dealing with transition stages of all the members of the eco-village in different stages and different moments in their lives. Dealing with action and doing instead of thinking, on really like developing the will to do things and to confront myself into this academic world that I was creating with me, inside of me. And then, let's do it. Like, let's work on it. So that was a huge tumbling moment in my life. And also the contact with nature. And that was a huge part of the whole process, like relating with the territory. And that territory that I was involved with has a special kind of notion of shaking things. And it was not so, it's a difficult terrain, let's say. It was not the tropics. So it was kind of so difficult, so different from my territory, let's say. Mm. So that presented a huge transition moment for everybody. It's like breaking the soil, being a pod and then a seed, and then breaking from that chaos process and becoming what you want to be, let's say. So that in itself, it's a chaos for the seed, but it's a future flower, let's say, or future fruit. So that was it. And then I went to different eco-villages around different intentional communities. And it's so interesting to see what the territories bring, understanding what the relationship with nature brought on people, and what people and how people interact with it. It's so diverse, so interesting, that I found that it needs to be, and this is what I call it, the glue, let's say, when I'm talking to intentional communities. Like, you can have the techniques, you can have whatever you want, all the resources, all the tools, let's say, but what's the glue? What is that brings people around, that wants to put their energy and will to be together? So I went from religious eco-villages with the more spiritual approach on how they relate. And when I say religious, I mean religare, which is like the relationship with the more profound and everything. Mm-hmm. I'm not speaking about dogmatism. Mm-hmm. So super interesting to see that more intentional communities related about being against the culture of the establishment, let's say, a counter culture, and that was the bond, that was the glue, let's say. Education communities, I think that is a huge, big deal here in Latin America, and how this is my part of, like, which is something that I always I try to share, like how it is when this kind of reflection comes on how is intentional communities in Latin America. I will say that one of the most inspiring, and I think that is a huge heartbeat in the intentional communities, is parents that they're having kids, like push them into this transition mode, because one thing is what they wanted with their lives, but something changes. I don't have kids, so I don't know. So, but this is what I have seen. Something changes that makes them transition, and they feel the need to have a different agreement, different environment for their kids. And then that is the glue for them. And I was like impressed by that. And there's so many good examples here in Ecuador. There's so many good examples of intentional communities around education. So that is a huge deal here.
And that leads me to the sort of the question around your involvement with this Reimagine Education and the Ecoversities Alliance. So taking, that transition from where you were to a different way of being in education, and the types of projects that you're engaged with now. Do you want to just describe some of how that fits with with what you're doing now?
So to have a frame, let's say, to understand, and I think that it's easier even for me to understand myself and how do I do things, is that I have two big branches, let's say. Social facilitation and work, that is something that it comes easy for me, and it's my service, let's say. That is one branch of what I do. And the other branch that it's also developing, and those branches are developing constantly, it's the connection with land and the landscape. And how can I facilitate that process with people through design and through understanding the subtle to the more technical points of view of the landscape, let's say. So those branches are for me part of everything that I do, and have their own kind of brands, let's say. And so these two branches, even though it seems that they're apart, they are the same. They are the same evolving system. So to feed one and to grow one is to feed and grow the other. So they are not separated. They are part of an integral kind of system, which is for me fundamental. And facilitation for me is a lot of education, and how we change and facilitate process of transition for everybody, and how we open spaces. For me, especially, is that, which is something that I resonated so much with what you were saying. For me, the sense of facilitation is allowing to open space where people can find a voice inside themselves and have the courage to express it, even if that means chaos. But chaos inside of a system that allows that chaos to grow into more life, into a new breath of life, let's say. Breath. I'm mixing that word. Sorry.
Yeah, breath of life. That sounded perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Breath of life. And from that, a new stage in the community development emerges, like allowing that spirit of the community, whatever that community is, a family, a project, a group of people, a rural community, even ONGs or business, can allow that to develop their own system on their own terms. So that has a lot to do with education, because for myself, from my point of view, there are two big paradigms that we confront all the time in what I do. Scarcity, is that right? Scarcity, okay. Scarcity and directionism, like is that? I haven't translated that these words.
No, it makes sense. Yep, scarcity and directionism. I've not heard the term, but I understand what it means. So,
on the traditional education system, there's a lot of that. Like, you need to do this, and this is the path, and there's like a narrowing of the path, and that is like not allowing to create and to people to be whatever they are really meant to be on their own terms. So if we have that from kids from early ages, we have adults that it's so difficult to make this transition because they need someone to tell them what to do. So difficult for people to take charge on their own terms. And this is something that I reflect on myself all the time, because I am the child that was directed, in these terms of. So how do we create an empathic path where we as a community can walk together and break from this directionism and this point of view of scarcity, and we create new paths that we decide to go and to learn from that? Even though there's sometimes that these paths are going to lead us to some endpoints, but we know that there's an endpoint to that path. So we learn from that and we keep creating on that. So how we facilitate those terms. And I found so much inspiration in education people and people that are more related with education. And I have so much hope from that. And I learned so much from people that are related with children, related with their own way of education. So that's why I'm related with the education transition movement here in Ecuador and in global networks like ecoversities.
So what are some of the projects that you've been doing? You started telling me about one the other day in the hospital. So who are you working with? Like, who are the kind of groups that you work with, and how does that manifest in the community? And I guess the other side of that too would be, or another dimension to that would be, how does that connect with local culture? So does permaculture kind of make sense to people in that way? Sorry, I bundle lots of questions together.
No.
I like the multiple descriptions of things.
No, I like it because it's like I take a deep breath because I want to make the connections and to make my words makes like sense because I see the connection that you're doing and I really like it. Okay, so how should I approach this? Let's start with the projects. Let's start with the projects. The project that I was telling you about, which is something that I'm writing right now, and it's something that I am developing, and something I was good writing a long time ago. I'm not good anymore, so this is so hard for me right now to write about the process that we have. So I have this brand, let's say, that gathers a lot of the things that I do, which is called Pangea or Pangea in English pronunciation. So one of the branches that as a, let's say, like a business or enterprise is to have a social branch inside the business. So everything that collects or gains through private projects, a small percentage of that goes to one project that I'm able to be related with and be able to construct. So before I arrived to the project inside the hospital that I'm going to explain later, I basically take 2 years finding a spot where my services can be of sense. Like instead of going to something and imposing something, really taking the time to listen and to see, I can bring something here, and everything, it's making myself to be included in this system. So it took me 2 years to arrive to a hospital. In a moment in the hospital where the guy that was in charge of the arrangement of the space was something with an awesome heart, a beautiful, beautiful guy. And there's also a doctor that was in charge of chronic diseases inside the hospital, which an amazing, amazing person. So, and there's so many other persons inside the hospital that was like, oh my God, this is amazing people to work with. This is the perfect place. And also the hospital has a huge area, a green area that was like unmaintained, like abandoned. We are talking about a public hospital. So resources on public health in Ecuador is scarce. And this is a hospital dedicated to elderly people. So a public hospital for elderly people, we only have, I think, 2 or 3 hospitals, or was 1 year ago or 2 years ago. So in this environment, after listening to everybody's and like to being open to this space and learning that there's a community of elderly people that was volunteering to more elderly people, and there were like giving poetry classes, free classes for the elderly, like the elderly people from the hospital came back to the hospital to give as a volunteers this help for more elderly people and create a community. So this emerging community need was there, and it was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. I feel that I can be part of this. So we developed this laboratory, as I said it, it was called El Huerto que Cura, which translates to the healing garden. And we managed the hospital, even though it's not so legal, we managed that the director of the hospital land for a period of 3 years. And then I can manage that land, and we share the use of the space and some facilities of the hospital. And then we managed to create a program with the doctor that was in charge of chronic diseases, which is something that you can have, like diabetes, for example. It's a chronic disease. There's so many varieties, but there are some that doesn't require strong treatment and allows you to do physical work. So with this doctor, we created a relationship where patients that when treated to the hospital, when they were finishing their treatment, they have the opportunity to relate with the poems, with the laughing yoga, they call it also. There was elderly people giving workshops on that. Or they can choose to be part of the healing garden. And they were prescribed, that's the word, prescribed 4 sessions in the healing garden. Wow. So I came up with a design that was an introductory design, and I made a socialization to start with, and then people came through that. And from that beginning, we reshape everything. Like, this is my idea, but this is mine. We need to make this to you, like to all of us. And then we managed to do that, which is a beautiful process in itself. And then we started creating the healing garden. So at the end, we were 12 elderly people that was part of the steady community of the, well, I'm counting with as an elderly guy there. I was part of also, but was one more of them. And we were 12, and we were the ones that each Friday we were for sure there. For sure we're there. And then more people came and go as they please. whenever they wanted to join. And it was beautiful because elderly people brought their children, their grandchildren also. People from afar started to come because they heard about the project and started to share stories. We managed to create, I can share the link if you want. We managed to create a visual story about, there was a girl from an indigenous community in the Amazon region that came, and she was inspired by the work that we were doing, and she was telling tales about their indigenous community. So we managed to create a visual storytelling of her story. We had a huge tree, which is called Cholan, in the middle of the garden, of the healing garden. And this was the elderly tree. So around this tree, the whole community gathered. We needed, mm-hmm. Yes, that's the word, needed like a sweater to the
around the trunk of the tree, yeah.
To the trunk of the tree, yes, to the trunk of the tree, and we started to share stories underneath the canopy of the tree. And we found that the healing garden started to get into something else, to storytelling, sharing knowledge. So we were starting to, with the help of more people, to bring these stories into different formats. And we wanted to share that with everybody, to share like this space inside of a public hospital for elderly people with low input of money. We have managed to create this community as an example of what you can do as a private corporation or how do you call it? It's not. Pangea is not a corporation. It's a private kind of enterprise.
Yeah. Business enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah, and how you can change the relationship with a community that usually in the cities are not taken care of. So it was, for me, it was a huge learning process. We created family. We were bound together. So it was amazing. It was a really nice experience. Sadly, it all ended in COVID situation, of course.
Oh, that is sad. I was sort of feeling so inspired. Although, one would hope that when things change again, that with the experience of that and with how many people it was able to touch from the medical profession to the community, that you might see them emerge in different places.
I think that one of the things that we can, the best that I can do right now is to share the story.
Yeah.
To share the story of how everything was, because we did it in a non-so-traditional way. Mm-hmm. We designed the place, and even in a subtle energy movement, we created a design that was based upon that, and we built upon that, and the community responded to that in a place that was designed to be a healing place.
Can you just say a bit more about that subtle energy design that you just mentioned then?
Okay, so this is interesting, and this is something that we, from the academic point of view, there's so much references from psychology of how we relate with nature and how nature can be a healing process to everybody. And you can take into account different variables, color, shading, light, even the figures of the plants and how the shape are, how we relate to different stages in different moments in our lives, in our trauma stages, and so on and so on. There's so many work on that. But it's based on a material point of view. Of course, we are material, we relate upon that, but this is what academy and directive education has shown us. But there's everything that is subtle, that people tend to have an idea or a sense that this feels good, let's say, and you don't know why it feels good. And it's so difficult to explain why it feels good. So there's a huge there are huge expressions of light in the subtle, let's say. Again, I'm going into this academic world and more traditional way of thinking from more spiritual, let's say, approach. Right now, even though it was like, I think it was 3 years ago, there's a paper with a valid number of samples that we can say now that the human brain, I'm talking into this academy kind of field again, but we can say now that the brain can feel and can like perceive subtle changes, variations in geomagnetic fields. We are not conscious about it. But our brain registers that. This is one step into understanding how we relate into a world that is surrounded by different kind of flows of energy, let's say, and different approaches into that. So a lot of like 5 years ago, I stumbled upon geobiology. I don't know if you have any relationship with that.
No.
So geobiology is based upon the knowledge of radiesthesia, which is how the image that we have, perhaps that is easy to relate, is how people manage to find sources of water and wells through sticks, let's say. No, like, so if you find in every culture, in every expression of culture, you will find someone that was dealing with these subtle energies, these subtle variations of fields that we perceive, and some people are able to perceive it more clearly, and even are people that are, it's like they can see it. If you go to Japan, you will find the Saoris. If you go to the Indie approach, you will find in the Vedas a huge knowledge about how people manage to find water and even create their structures. If you go to China, you will find everything that is Tai Chi related. If you go to even early stages, you go to Rome's in the people that work for the roads of Rome. There was a guy that was basically dedicated to understand the flows of water underneath the roads and find the better placement of the roads. And they were doing with the sticks. In Europe, you will find the druids that we're finding this. In America, in South America, you will find the Amautas, you will find the Taitas, that they were, of course, finding water, but not only that, but they were like finding the settlement and finding the right place for your home based upon that. And they were doing this based on the mountains and the flow of energy of the mountains.
What did you call that? What did you call the one in South America?
They're called, like, the people that have this information, this knowledge. You can find it in Amautas, which is the one that has the knowledge, or the Taitas. Taitas. I'm talking in Quechua. Mm-hmm. This is words in Quechua, which is the word from the ancient language from this region of Ecuador. This is only one. We have several different languages, but I'm only referring to one. And this is one that is related with the Incas. And understanding my territory is a different talk, but the Incas only have 40 years of relationship with this territory, but we have that language here. And we have a different pronunciation. In Peru, it's called Quechua. In Ecuador, it's called Quichua. Mm. So in this Quechua language, Amautas, the one that has the knowledge, and Taitas are the ones that has the people with wisdom that guides the community, let's say, had this knowledge of how to relate with. So radiesthesia and geobiology is kind of the modernization of this knowledge. Mm. And at the beginning, I was a complete skeptic. Like, I don't believe in this at all. Like, I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. This is not it. Like, this is wrong. This is wrong. And along my path, I found a guy that I really, really find that he was truly. And he did that. And I was like, okay, because it comes from you, I want to approach it. Explain to me. And at the time, I was like really close-minded about these things. And well, long story short, I was like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but it's so hard to believe from me. I need to try it myself. And I tried. I took wires, like coat hangers. And I tried with that, and they move. And I was like, okay, they're not. I'm bending my something with my elbow, something with my shoulder. Something is happening here. Like, okay, I'm gonna be steady, and they move. And I was like, okay. And I leave that for a while, and was like, what is happening here? This is madness. And then sometime before, I was like, again, curious about it. And I keep like working on it a little bit. And there was again a relationship of love and hate, let's say, with this knowledge. And they got to a point where it was a deep understanding of myself, because it was so hard for me. Again, I come up from a male with privileges and with this notion of machism, of men don't feel things. I come from that, okay? So breaking this notion that I'm able to feel more than already my scarce knowledge of my feelings was nerve-wracking for me. Nerve-wracking, like how am I feeling, and there's something popped and opened, and it was like a rush of emotions and feelings, and oh my God, it was like, and I became ill, and I was not able to express on why I was ill, fever. And then it was like this transition inside my body that I was going through. And then I began to step by step find a way of understanding and accepting all these feelings and emotions that goes through me. And as much I was going through that, this work with the wires was becoming more steady and was making more sense to me. So that was 4 years ago. And then I became to understand what these patterns, these lines of energy that comes to the earth make sense to me. And I was doing more research. I created my own scale to make sense of things. Again, this part of myself that is more into trying to figure things out and to make sense of things into a more material world also. I'm also that. So I created a scale, and I figured out, going through ancient sites, that there's more than these lines that people tells you about, the Harman lines, their ley lines, there's so many different lines, but there are more than that. There are more variables upon that interrelate. And the interrelationship with all of these variables make one point expressed into something that affects life, not only humans, but bees, for example. I'm going to start a kind of a small project with a friend that is a beekeeping guy. And he has already, when I was talking to him about this, he was like, it makes a lot of sense that bees choose one place to be more related with the swarms of bees. They always go to one place. We should check that into that. So this is something that is going to happen a couple months from now. So I start making this sense of this and going through Colombia and understanding these ancient sites. And I found a pattern that emerges, a pattern on how ancient cultures related with their sacred places, their homes, with these subtle energies. And for me, as a designer, was a huge deal. And it was like, oh my God, I have unlocked a new layer of design, understanding how elder cultures did. But I don't want to bring that knowledge that is ancient, because we live in a different age. We have a different relationship with the earth. So how do I update this? So I have this question of, I value deeply the knowledge of ancient cultures, but we live in a different context. We live in a different era. So for me, updating that knowledge is essential. Learning from that it's awesome. It's invaluable. So this is again a thing about being a merchant of that knowledge. And this, at least for me, is not about that. It's really deeply learning and sharing that knowledge into a world that needs to relate more deeply with their relationship with nature and how relate with everything. So I keep investigating, I keep researching, I keep going to these sacred places, and I found more or less independently of the culture, if it is a culture from Colombia, it is a culture from Ecuador or wherever, they use more or less the same patterns, which makes sense, which makes a lot of sense. And I was like, okay, I need to keep finding a way of like proving myself now. Okay, if this is true, I need to check this. And one of the conversations that was awesome for me was I have an old friend, and she was studying acupuncture, and we haven't met in a long, long time ago. And that she studies acupuncture is not something that pops into my mind when I see her. And we get together and I talk a little bit of what I'm doing, and I tell her about the points of energy and how points are related with each other. And there's one, at least for me, it's female, and one that is male for me. And sometimes they are together and sometimes they are apart. And she was like, what you are describing Chinese medicine about acupuncture. And I was like, no way, really? And she was like, you are describing this? And she was explaining it to me like, this is what I'm seeing. This is the pattern that I am seeing. This is amazing, because I'm seeing the points of energy of the earth and how we can relate to that. So these open a huge world for me, which I'm developing still, which is the acupuncture of the earth, which is how we relate into this point with trees, of course. With trees, of course, trees have this kind of dual with their roots and their canopies and trunks, and they are kind of the natural needles of the earth, and they balance these energies. And this is a huge branch of understanding and how the trees, some trees are more related with some points, some other trees are more related with, and there's the native trees and how they relate with the specific territory. And in different regions are different trees and so on. So this is a huge, huge understanding of that. And I was talking to you about the confirmations. And I remember that I was facilitating this relationship with land with a family that brought a land. And I was doing these exercises of expressing what they're sharing and how the land relates for them and what is land for them. And I knew that there was one point of energy where you put kind of like a gesture to the land, that you put your, how do you call that? Like una ofrenda, an offer, yes, an offer to the land. And I knew there's a point where you do that. So I created this whole like session with them, and we went into this kind of deeply sentimental moment in their process of relating with their land, what it means for them to be a family in that moment. And they were like, so I found this place of energy, and was like, okay, this is a point where my interpretation says that we should put here an offer. So let's do that. And I started digging, and I found a vessel from ceramics, from an ancient culture there, that they did exactly the same. They did an offer, a ceramic pot. And I was like, oh my God, 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 oh my God. This is, and I was like super freaked out. And I was like, oh my God. And the family was like, what did you did? What you did? What you did? And they felt that I was like, I hit some irrigation line. And I was like, did you break the irrigation line? Don't tell me that you break the irrigation line. Like, no, there's nothing from that. It's like, okay, come. And I show them the pottery. And they were like going crazy. Like the dad of the family, let's say, like, okay, I'm going to bring the shovel. Let's dig this, because there's this idea of gold, let's say, of a treasure. Of course, yes. But I don't see it like that. But I was like snapping from my, like, whoa, what a moment for me. Like, this is the confirmation that I was looking. And then I saw the intentions of like taking that offering from the land. And I was like, okay. Let's have a moment. Let's breathe a little bit. What we are doing this emotional moment that we are having, somebody else had a long time ago. And I'm inviting you to reflect upon that and to think if you want to take that offering that they did, or if you want to join your offering with them as a way of getting into communing with your territory. And I was hoping that with that, they don't take it out, hopefully, but it's like, it's not my decision, it's their decision. And they took a moment, and happily, they didn't take it out. It was a super emotional moment for everybody. And at the end, they joined their offering with the offering that was already inside of there, and they completely forgot about that place, which was something super good. And for me, it was a huge moment. Like, I'm not crazy. This makes a lot of sense. And from that, I have been having like 3 or 4 more moments like that in different areas of Ecuador. And I was able to find a burial that was dedicated to water collecting. And that is a huge branch, because the elders' cultures also use these points to allow the flow of water. So they were doing harvesting of water in ancient times, but they were using also this knowledge to allow the flow of water and to make this water revitalized, let's say. So there's a huge understanding that I'm developing into that, which is super, super amazing. I'm getting into a point where I can see the patterns on water uses of this, and it's huge. I'm super excited of trying it out. But there are it's difficult to find someone that wants to do that and has the resources to do that, and wants to experiment with this. I haven't found anyone that wants to do that yet, but I think that I have it more or less.
It sounds absolutely amazing. There's lots of things going through my mind as you're saying this. There's a whole tradition of dowsing that comes from the culture that I'm from. And,
really?
I remember as a child, my mum used to talk about it all the time. And I remember as a child doing exactly what you said with the bits of wire. And my brother and I would go around and we'd see what we could find. And we'd end up digging up all these bits and pieces around the garden. It was kind of amazing. And then I'd forgotten about it. I hadn't really given it much attention. But now that you're speaking about it, I think tapping into that feeling of it, like I don't use a tool, but there's a sense that I get about places. And when there's something else that happens when I'm doing permaculture designs, there's this sort of intuitive connective force that happens. So I'm wondering whether this is something that you're developing and fine-tuning and researching, connecting, and as you're saying, evolving into a contemporary form. I was just spending a bit of time talking with Indigenous elders, and there's this sense that Indigenous people in this land are the custodians, and like we're part of the kind of the colonizing group that's landed here. And so where we're at now, we're saying we're kind of aspiring contemporary custodians, and together we're finding a new way forward. And it's not that sense of going back. And so what I hear you talking about too is it's like there's a forward movement of acknowledging the deep history and wisdom, but finding a way to be present now, to connect through time and space, and to find a way forward that's really what we need in the world right now, at the scale that we need right now. And I'm wondering, the kind of skills that you're developing, remembering, evolving, is this something that you're offering as part of any kind of permaculture education, or an educational program, like teaching other people how to do this, see this, feel this? When coming back to the whole education, how is this something that, or are you still playing with it yourself?
I'm always playing with it. I'm always playing. I think that the world is play. Really, really, that word is like jugar. It's in Spanish, and to play. I think that it's essential with it. Like sometimes, yeah, that is the way. There's so many implications around that. But yes, I keep doing with that. There's so much on what I'm doing. Somehow is trying to make it sense and to make it conscious. But there's so many people that has a lot of fine tuning with themselves that are already doing what I'm doing, let's say, not the way that I'm doing, but they have developed this sense on themselves, and they're super accurate. I have one anecdote about that. I don't know if you should. We have time to I will make it short. I was doing
Go ahead. Yeah.
in an eco village that I was there. I was doing some research in their property, but they didn't ask me to do that. I was doing that by myself. So they find out that I was doing that, because some people tend to be more even aggressive into this knowledge, like what the fuck are you doing? Like, get out of here, like don't do that. Like, or some people are more open to it, or people are like, well, you are crazy, keep going what you're doing, whatever you're doing. You're not harming anyone, so let's keep doing what you're doing. So you find diversity into this whole world, of course. And in this eco village that I was, they saw that I was doing that, and it was like, "You do this," and I was like, "Yes." So there's a bunch of couples, but one of the couples, the wife was, "I deeply believe of what you're doing. Like, can you tell me more about it?" And I explained everything that my path and everything. And he was like, "Can you measure our room?" And of course, you can measure your room, and you can find a good place where you can rest and put your bed, and so on and so on. And I was like, "Yeah, I can do that, sure. But remember that it's not yourself. You are with your husband, and this is a decision that you have to make both. Like, I cannot go into a space that is yours. Like, please check with your husband." So she went and checked with her husband. And of course, her husband is an skeptic.
Yeah.
A skeptic. Yeah. Thank you. Skeptic. And he was like, "I don't believe in that at all. And like, I don't really believe in that. But if you wanted to do it, do it." I was like, "Okay, I have your consent. Let's make this." Okay. And I went, and I was like, "Okay, your bed is really, really well placed in between some flows that are not really good, but it's well put. Like, this is pretty good. okay, let's keep going. And I found that everything in the room was in the right place, like someone did the job already. Mm. Like they created the room with this knowledge. And I was like, whoa, like, and the wife was like, you're getting surprised. We need to change everything, don't we? We need to move everything around. And like, no, you don't need to do anything. It's perfect as it is. Who did this? Did you bring somebody like me to design this? And she was looking at me and she was like, no. And I was like, who arranged the whole room? And she was like, okay, even though my husband is someone that is a skeptic, I pronounce it right?
Skeptic, yep.
Yeah. Even though my husband is someone that is skeptic, he has so well tuned their kind of notions of how things are in the right place. He is the one that put all of the things in this room in the right place.
I think you were going to say it was her, not him. That's so fascinating.
It was him. And I was like, okay, we need to talk. You have done it more accurate. Like you have done it in the spot. You are amazing. You don't need anything else. This is perfect as it is. Mm-hmm. Even the way that he has a spot there where he was sitting in the computer and there's one spot of energy that allows imagination and creativity, allows this flow into this flow, mood flow, let's say. And he was in the spot there. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. You are a skeptic, but you have this. And this is what, of course, everybody has this. It's not that I am the weirdo. Everyone feels these things. But the way that we relate with this information, it's different. It's super interesting.
That's fascinating. So I wonder whether, I know we're getting, well, we're actually at the hour, and I'm wondering whether we could maybe sort of bring this back to a close by somehow describing how this relates to you in your permaculture work, maybe, or where you and generally where you see permaculture emerging in Ecuador. Sorry, that's two very questions to wrap up, but just as a sort of a summary, I suppose.
I think that I think one of the most beautiful proposals of permaculture is on how we relate with everything. And permaculture, like the way that I see, which is something that I know that everybody has their own points of view, and this is just my point of view first. The best teacher, of course, is nature. And this is and how I see it, permaculture like proposes a lot of the learning process inside nature, inside our garden, inside of our more naturally space that we have around. But this has to do a lot with, some people have called it like eco-alphabetization, which is this organic way of thinking. And this is more than the garden. And this goes through and projects into everything that we do, into our relationships, which is, again, with nature, with everybody, with our family, with each other. So creating and healing our connection with nature allow us to reshape the way we think and the way we relate with everything else in our world and how we relate with life. And this is essential for me because, yeah, permaculture gathers a lot of eco-techniques, again, let's say, which is amazing, and it's awesome to understand that into late 70s, beginning of the 80s. Of course, you remember where permaculture comes from and how we developed that knowledge from permaculture into these days. Is, I think that this is it, like this way of organic thinking and how we can move forward from this organic way of like networking thinking that we developed through our gardening and relationship with nature, and we put it into our social scheme of things on our community level. Because yes, we can go and create a beautiful piece of land with all the ecotechnics that we have, but we are isolated. And some people tend to do that. So for me, at least here in Ecuador, I can talk about from me and what I do. I cannot talk from the perspective of different people. I'm trying to make that use of permaculture, let's say, allowing that knowledge and that organic way of thinking, which takes a lot of time, but that I think that helps community, and we can push permaculture into a next step, let's say. And I nurture a lot of the way of thinking of regeneration. And there's a lot to talk about that and how permaculture bonds into that, let's say, and allows that regeneration thinking and listening, deeply listening, because I feel that in the permaculture movement, we don't listen too much sometimes. We impose sometimes. And then this is the call to listen, to deeply listen to our land, to deeply listen to our community, and to make sense with this organic knowledge into our relationships, into everything that we do. So, yeah, I'm always trying to push things forward. I have been doing permaculture and surf classes, permaculture and acupuncture of the earth classes. And most recently, I have done permaculture for entrepreneurs, allowing to make those connections of nature and organic thinking into in enterprises and pymes. Is that how you call it? Pymes? No. Like small enterprises.
Small enterprises? Micro enterprise. That's always.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that is the way that this is the word that I related with, let's say. This is the branches that I have, even though sometimes I'm able to reach into more organizational level of ONGs and so on. But I'm always trying to, this is what I have at hand. Mm-hmm. This is what I can do with what I have in this environment that I am right now. So that's pretty much how I see it. And this is how I'm trying to do things here in Ecuador. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's inspirational in just so many different ways, and peeled back the layers. We just went deeper and deeper into areas of, I think, of the permaculture world that don't really get talked about that much, but there's a kind of a sense of it there, I think. So thank you for bringing that kind of unseen world into the visible world during this conversation, because it's there all the time, whether we acknowledge it or not. So I really appreciate you going into that space and describing it and sharing your experience. It's incredibly powerful, those stories you shared about, the deep time connection and that deep connection to place and culture and how that helps to heal our own selves and how we are in the world, and that's where the regeneration is going to stem from. It's when we actually enter into those spaces. So thank you so much. I would like to say to the listeners that we're going to pop some links down below to Juan's work. So if there's anything that you'd like to share with us, any links that you mentioned or references or ways people can get in touch with you, you'll find all that information down below in the show notes. So thank you again so much for being here. It's been, well, look, I'm getting all, those of you who are listening to this won't see this, but in the on the video, I'm getting completely blown out by the light, and I've turned into a ghost. So I have to find a bit of shade here. No, there we go. Yeah, so thank you so much, Juan. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you for opening these spaces and for listening. I think it's so weird to talk so much. For me, I'm always trying to make everyone talk, but this is the format that we are doing. We are turning tables, let's say. But thank you. I have feel really comfortable. I think that I share, this sharing entails how comfortable I feel with you. So thank you so much for that.
So that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining me. If you like a copy of my top 10 books to read, click the link below, pop in your email, and I'll send it straight to you. You can also watch this interview over on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link below as well. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and if you've enjoyed it, please consider giving me a star rating. Believe it or not, the more people do this, the more podcast bots will discover this little podcast. So thanks again, and I'll see you again next week.